Namaskar. Welcome to Argumentative Indians, a platform for honest debates. Today we have very prominent guests with us, and they don't need any introduction. They're opinion leaders and keynote speakers. We have Sanjay Jha, former politician and noted author. We have Suhel, Seth, businessman, actor, columnist. We have Ratan Sharda, expert on RSS and author of several books. We have Dr. Indranil of OP Jindal Global University, renowned expert in public health and health economics. We have Devashish Roy Chaudhary, who's a well-known journalist, writer, and researcher based in Hong Kong. Welcome to all of you. Thanks a lot for joining the panel. Over the last 20 years, India has assiduously built an international image of itself as a dynamic modern democracy with a stable government and fast-growing economy. It has drawn global attention to its thriving technology sector, its elite engineering schools, and its advancements in space exploration. Recently, it has positioned itself as the pharmacy of the world, and through its drugs and vaccine diplomacy, tried to take on a leadership role among the developing countries. Furthermore, as the nation with the world's fourth largest armed force and a nuclear arsenal, it has long claimed to be a responsible power that others can rely on. But now, as the world looks with horror at the heartbreaking images of India's funeral pyres and people desperately begging for oxygen for their dying loved ones, India's global image stands shattered. Furthermore, countries which had been counting on India's commitments for their vaccine supplies have been left stranded. To quote Shashi Tharoor, global leadership must begin at home. India will eventually get through this crisis, but after such disastrous management at home, will it be able to justify a greater role in global governance? And with that, I invite our speakers to basically lay out their case and let us know their views. So we will start with Mr. Suhel Seth. So please.
So thank you and welcome to all my fellow panelists. I want to make a couple of opening remarks. Number one, has India's image taken a beating? The answer is yes. It's taken a beating on two fronts. Number one, on our lack of preparedness, which also includes lack of clarity in policy and a lack of planning. We've come quite clearly under the microscope on these two accounts for sure. Number two, bad news sells more than good news. So while what has happened with funeral pyres and what's happened with people gasping for oxygen is a fair summary, and a lot of media internationally and nationally has picked it up, I think we also need to recognize that this pandemic has spared not one nation. Each nation has its own tales of woe. We recognize these tales because they are closer home than most others. But these tales of woe are there. And I don't want to get into the whataboutery of saying, oh, but New York also has bodies lying in refrigerated trucks. Death is not an arena of competitiveness. It is shameful what has happened. Third, rather than say that our image has taken a beating, I think our self-confidence has taken a beating. And self-confidence is both internal and external. We don't feel as confident as we did, say, 4 years ago, even 2 years ago. We feel red-faced when we come to terms with the realities that we have had to contend with. What's more important is there is no escape. We don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, which means there is more fear, there's more panic, there's more disarray, both in our minds and in our souls. Remember, image has two components to it, perception and reality. Ironic as it may sound, sometimes perception feeds reality, sometimes perception becomes the reality, sometimes the reality is removed from perception. But on all three parameters, if you examine them carefully, our image has taken a beating. India today is a pale shadow of the superpower, the well-governed nation, the well-heeled country that we were made out to be. And again, let me be honest, it was our making. We embellished our brand to have this machismo, this strong arm approach, the fact that we are who we are. But here's the other reality. Investors look at countries based on the economic prowess of that nation. Investors look at a country based on what the country can offer in terms of consumers and returns. I think as this story of COVID ebbs, that will enhance further. So I don't think there is a long-term image beating. Please understand that under Trump, America had that same image beating. America's image took a beating during Trump's rule, Trump's reign. But January 24 changed it all. January 24th or January 19th, whenever the inauguration day is, it changed it. It changed it slightly, and it continues to change. So my view in finality is as follows. Has India's image taken a beating? The answer is yes. More because of what we've been able to show to the world or what the world has seen of us. Remember the grim scenarios of Indians not being able to find basic medical attention, of Indians not preparing for the worst, are the images and the memories that will remain. Finally, I genuinely believe there is another story, but that will never get traction now. It'll get traction later. Parallelly, there's a brilliant story of how Indians have come to the help of India, how Indians have helped each other, how the globe has come to the help of India, how NRIs have helped India. But that's a parallel story that will have to wait. Let the bad news first get over. But I will say this, don't write off India, the India story yet. These things happen in the life cycle of a brand. They will also happen in the life cycle of a nation. But this too shall pass. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Moving on to Mr. Sanjay Jha.
Well, thanks very much. I think that was a very brilliant, short presentation of his views by Suhel. I think it sets the context for this discussion. I'll try and keep myself as brief as possible, although they say that you give politicians an inch, they will take a yard. And I'm not yet a retired politician, let me tell you that. So let's jump into the subject. I think, every catastrophe, every global event that in a great number of ways were cataclysmic in proportion or captured public imagination because of the sheer severity of its impact has one telling picture or a face. You had that for the Vietnam War. You had that for the end of the World War when the sailor is kissing the nurse in New York. You have pictures of what happened after some of the most bloody riots in different parts of the world, including India. I think these are manifestations that, in a sense, capture the essence of that moment. For example, last year when the migrants trooped back, you had those pictures of people, a woman, a young child, walking by a railway track on a scorching summer afternoon, all by themselves, and looked like, humanity was trying to eke out a survival based on their own instincts for living. I look at what's going on today, and to take forward, I won't repeat what Suhel has already said. But the most disturbing image to me, and I'm sure for all of us on the panel too, will be the 70, I don't know how many is the exact number, 100 bodies down the sacred Ganga River. That was not just a reminder of how cruel COVID has been, but the fact that, at the time of death, and I'm a Hindu, and I know that in our custom and religion, when somebody dies, the farewell that is given is when everybody comes together in collective grief. The fact that, and I just try to see myself as someone, if I had lost a member of my family in some rural hinterland of Uttar Pradesh, what excruciating pain it would be for me to actually let my father or my mother or some relative of mine be put in a bag and be just kind of floated down a river with maybe 60 others, not knowing whether it's tomorrow going to reach any place, whether it will rot, whatever else will happen. I know these are hard terms, but ladies and gentlemen, we are addressing a very serious human tragedy. To me, that entire picture is a very dark reminder of the fact that states do abandon their citizens. I don't think they do so willingly, but they do so because of oversight. They do so because they fail. And to me, that's painful. That's painful. Is it going to go away ever? No, I don't think so. I feel, the oxygen supply going short and people dying in a Gangaram hospital in Delhi. I don't live in Delhi, but I believe it's one of the most prestigious private hospitals. You have people who are struggling to get an ambulance. It's a humongous challenge to get an ICU bed. It's tough to get a ventilator. And then when somebody gets there, they die because there is no oxygen supply. And I say to myself, what are we, right? We want to be a 5 trillion economy. We are the toast of the world. I mean, absolutely no denying. I still believe, I agree with Suhel, that India will remain pretty much on the menu for global investors. It's a big consumer market. It's a booming labor market as well. But I do feel that, somewhere down the line, if the world media is today talking about us in the way they are, I mean, end of day, I think even that is a mirror to what we have become. And let us not feel bad about it. I feel the honesty of accepting that we messed up is the first step to renewal. What I have not liked about the way we are handling this as politicians, as people on television, as people in different governments, and this is bipartisan across all political parties, is that we don't acknowledge that we screwed up. We screwed up, acknowledge it, it's okay. As Suhel rightly said, I mean, this is an unprecedented virus. None of us know when it's going to come to an end. America is saying you can now move without a mask. I don't know when will that happen in India. It will, at some point it will. But we need to have people in our country who will build our credibility when we say, hey, listen, I goofed up. It's all right. It's all right to make a mess of things. I mean, is Narendra Modi or Rahul Gandhi or Donald Trump or Joe Biden infallible? They're not. I mean, you're a political leader. It's okay. It's all right. You're not some kind of a permanent genius that is not got any fault lines. And I think that's where we fail India. Our effort at this point should be to try and get oxygen to the people. But if governments try and do the oxygen of publicity at this point, then I say, hang on, guys, we got a serious moral problem. We got a moral problem. Yeah. I think all of us on this show are so blessed. We're so privileged that we can speak English, we can talk on the show and influence people one way or the other. But I just keep telling myself, I mean, think of those people who live, I come from Bihar, right? I know the villages out there. I haven't been there for donkey's years, but I know how tough it is to eke out a living. The fears people live with. Where do they go? And let me tell you, the rural India has never had any public health infrastructure, and this government is not to be blamed. It's an inherited legacy where all political parties are responsible at state and central levels. The fact is, can we run away from that reality? Suhel is one of the best people in brand. And I just want to maybe throw up that issue here for everyone to think through. A brand ultimately is all about trust. There is a trust deficit in India at the moment for sure, which is why social media is buzzing with people reaching out to each other. And I think people are so delighted to at least retweet and put a tag and say, help, whoever can help, help. Please do it and help. And I think that is the silver lining or the sliver of hope amidst all the doom and gloom we have seen. So I remain optimistic on my country. I remain bullish that the people of India will find a way. But I would like our governments to stop living on jugaad. Please don't run this country on jugaad. There is no quick fix-it for problems. Find a way. You have the resources. People have voted you in. Use them. But only use them for the lowest common denominator, as you see it, is the person with the lowest per capita income in your country. The day we set our sights right, I can tell you everybody will rally. Corporates will rally, public policy specialists will rally, world will help you as they are. But politicians in our country need to think about the weakest. The rest of us cannot just fend for ourselves, we can contribute to the change. But political leadership at this point of time, I believe, is where India's brand will be tested.
Thank you, sir. Before moving on to the next panelist, I would like to open a poll on one thing that you mentioned. The state has abandoned its people. So I'd like to open a poll just to get a sense of how many people feel that the Indian state failed its people. I think we can all see it. We'll share the results later. Moving on, we'd like to get in Mr. Ratan Sharda. So please, your views would be helpful.
I think we Indians have a habit of going to the extreme emotions. And thanks for calling me now for the first time on a debate. And it's a debate on which I have generally avoided. Let me be very frank on the COVID issue. I think we people swing from one extreme to the other very easily. This urge to self-flagellate ourselves on any kind of setback is something that we love, I think. Did India lose its position as one of the prime, destinations for the world or in its prestige? I don't really feel so. It's a global pandemic. Have other countries done better than us? Sorry, no. You can't say that don't talk of other countries. We have to talk of more countries. I'll have to talk about USA, which has got 1/4 the population of India, 10 times the health budget than India. It has got more people have died there. I will not go figures because people are not figure. Then people have died in India. Same thing is true of Europe also. When you say that image of India's burning pyres is a bitter truth, it is up to you how you encash the tragedy. The way it has been encashed against India is not something that India did to others, because people are not given treatment over 60 years in very well-developed countries. They were allowed to die. They were on the stretcher all through. The coffins were piling up. Nobody really, highlighted that in India as far as we are concerned, because we have that kind of compassionate heart. We understand that every society has a problem. What really damaged India? I would say the people ridiculing Covaxin, people questioning Covaxin, people questioning the very technical, the highly scientific achievement of India and joking about it, telling it will make you impotent, it is not good and it has not been tested, should Modi take it or not? This hesitancy cost us a huge amount of actual health problems. Was it required? No, it was not required. When you talk about the role of government, we forget that this government had given 17 advisory in 2 months about impending disaster, and they have every state government has to take care. The same opposition which talked about central government controlling all the operations in the first phase, then they said give it to the state governments. When it was given to state governments, they started saying no, it's application of responsibility. This play of politics in every aspect of human life, in our national life, is a curse that we have. We have to get out of that curse. If you look at the numbers also, India ranked 13 in terms of per million per week increase in the COVID patients. It ranked 10th in overall cumulative numbers per 100 million. And even our death rate was lower than others. Okay, now there are more deaths are coming up. The numbers may go up. But so far, we have not done as poorly as we think. This entire way of behaving, taking this up, you have oxygen shortages, start with the oxygen shortage, you are given money, you don't put up oxygen plants. Then when court says, okay, do the audit, then no, I have got enough oxygen. Is this the way it should work? Is this how when media plays, what kind of role media plays? You talk of Ganga, bodies in Ganga, yes, highly tragic. But the way reaction on political panels on TV, they say, hang the IS, this, that, what is the IS officer going to patrol some remote part of river? This show of anger every time, this show of extreme emotions is something that you must not do in these times of a huge tragedy that has attacked the entire world. If you look at even numbers, when the numbers rose, we had media which was lauding the chief ministers who had done worse in terms of actual control of COVID. It is called political game. Do we need to play political games and do we need to score points? Number of vaccinations. It is just next to USA. It's more than any other country, combined Europe, combined USA, North America. That is the numbers. And we are planning to have 4.5 times more vaccines made in next 6 months. If Pfizer were to do it for India, it would require 3.5 years, an entirely new kind of supply chain. So when we're putting down, did anybody react when Adar Poonawalla had to go to UK? Any of the people anywhere, did they respond to it? The kind of behavior do with our people who are wealth creators, who are science, who are people who lead science of India, if they are threatened, they have to leave the country for whatever time. What does it say about our political establishment? None of us who could speak spoke against it, and nobody tried to see that. They in fact started abusing Poonawalla. So this attitude of ours is a huge problem. You talk of vaccine. Rotavirus in the world came in 1998, in India it came in 2015. Japanese encephalitis vaccine came in 1913. The world in India, it came in 2013. And Yogi, whom we keep on abusing, he was the first one to fight for encephalitis and saw to it that his district had the least cases and it was cured. I can give number of such cases of various vaccines coming so late in India, but I would not. My simple point is we should stop crying about what is happening. We should stop agitating what is happening. We should absorb it. We should try to find solutions which will keep on awakening the government where they're failing. Our infrastructure had improved. We let it collapse again. What kind of governance you're talking about? Whether it's Congress or BJP, it doesn't matter. Ventilators rusting in places. In Rajasthan, they were given out to private hospitals. If this is the way we take care of patients, we can't keep on blaming our country's image. Our country's image was improved when Modi ji exported vaccines to all the countries, medicines to all the countries. That is the reason the world has stood up with India, and now going back to it, what India gave to the world. Every country from poor to rich was served by India. That is what India's strength is, and that is going to remain despite all the naysayers, despite all the people who keep on crying about India's image. And as the dust settles down, we'll find that India's work for the global order and nations will be appreciated. And what we have faced is actually horrendous. And if infrastructure did not improve in 70 years, which Supreme Court very rightly pointed out, then do you expect that 6 years will be able to take over what has not been done in 70 years? It will take time. Yes, we have low health budget. It should be improved. So there are many lessons to be learned, but not really we have to cry aloud saying, God, we are where we are and where we are. We are going to, India is collapsing and all that. That's a Western worldview we should not support. That's my submission.
Thank you, sir, for a very fact-based counter view. Since you brought up a few points about how India's situation is compared with other countries, which are now sort of horrified at the situation in India, I would like to bring in Dr. Indraneel, who's an expert in public health policy and health economics.
First of all, thanks, and I'm very honored to be part of this extremely distinguished panel. Now, I would like to first say that we didn't have a great image. So far, public health is concerned, we didn't have an image at all. Let's get the facts clear. Out of every 5 deaths of children below 1 year happens in India. Every 100 mothers die while giving birth, 20 are from our country. Our life expectancy is lower than many of our neighbors. Public investment has been talked about. We are among the lowest spender on health in terms of GDP. We spend 1.1% of GDP. Most of the developing countries on an average spend 2 to 3% of GDP. I'm not even talking about the developed world. Malaysia, Thailand, Sri Lanka, even Nepal and Bhutan spend more as a percentage of GDP. So there is no reason to believe that we were a country of great image in terms of public health is concerned. But at the same time, we are a country of enormous contradiction. Let me bring out some facts. In Delhi, the density of MRI machines is more than London. Same is with the CT scan. So one MRI machine per person, the density is lower in Delhi compared to London. At the same time, in many of our states, we have 80%, 65% vacancy of human resources. So we live with enormous contradiction. The thing is, in terms of hunger index, we are going back. Every year we are receding. So, the thing is, one of the most important thing to recognize that we have spent a lot of energy and effort in image building. Entire thing about vaccination was geared towards image building. And this is typical of the current dispensation so much more compared to any other regimes beforehand. And that is one of the strongest thing I would like to make. And the one message the government has continuously given to us citizens that we don't care. Can we have a health system without caring for the people? Every year, 5 crore people fall below poverty line because they have to pay from their own pocket to get healthcare. Have we tried to address it? Is it possible to address in 7 years? Maybe not. But what did this government do when it came to power? For the first 3 years, we saw continuous cut in health budget. Public spending on health as a percentage of budget as central government share was one of the lowest in the year 17-18. So we were building a crisis. The pandemic has exposed us to the world, but we were creating this crisis. Whatever little better things were happening in terms of National Rural Health Mission, this government cut its spending. So mothers were no more able to get free healthcare, free deliveries in hospitals. So what we see is systematic. It has happened, not only this government to be blamed, it's a systematic apathy that we have for the millions of people of the country, but there was no effort to change all of that. Look at the current budget. It was said that the health budget has increased by 137%. If you look at the numbers carefully, it's actually you are matching apples with oranges. You brought in new schemes, and then in your existing budget, the actual increase was only 6% when you take out the inflation. So it is all centered around image building. There is a lot of talk about who is responsible. It's a collective responsibility where state, center, local bodies play a crucial role. Without that, a pandemic cannot be addressed. I would like to give few facts about what role center played. They announced a meager package of 15,000 crores for COVID-related care. How much money did they give to the state governments in this period? And I'm quoting Parliamentary Standing Committee here. 6,000 crore till March 21st. The package was announced in the month of May. So you were really not trying to address the situation. The second wave was in the offing. Public health researchers were time and again telling us that this is going to happen. Our leaders were busy winning elections, bribing people and trying to get votes. The costly, this is really painful. We have spent a lot of time in image building, and we should, and it is important, it is our duty to be critical of this government, because government is for all of us. It's every government. So when we criticize, we cannot be identified because we are criticizing. I think this government is time and again doing that. It's spending so much time trying to pinpoint who is blaming, who is raising voice. People are dying. Let us get our acts together. There's very little capital investment done in this period to improve. Why did we not buy? It's not about one government at all. It's about a collective failure. In Delhi, which is one of the richest states in the country, the municipal corporations have 8 out of 10 frontline health workers post vacant. What were we doing? In this year, we could have at least tried to recruit more people. Could we not recruit more doctors in the rural areas where we need more care? Nurses, paramedics? I'll come to solutions later, but actually the one thing that India has projected to the world is the sense that we don't care, and we need to change it a lot. There was a mention about civil society, the people doing a lot. Actually, the hands and wings of the civil society are cut by the FCRA laws that have been brought into this country. Many organizations who are on the field trying to provide relief and care cannot get foreign assistance. There is all these conspiracy theories that are built up that NGOs are against the country, and that's right. And a lot of image building. So I think this, first of all, we should drop this image building and try to recognize, I agree with Sanjay, that there is a problem and we are sincerely trying to address. Here, every citizen will be participating with you if starting from local bodies, the state governments and center take a plunge to do these things differently. We need collective action. I'll stop here and wait for my next.
Thank you, sir. You make a fair point that India was never really seen for its healthcare. There wasn't really much of an image for India's healthcare infrastructure to begin with. But at the same time, I would like to point out that as a country, the world sees us as a country of IT engineers, software developers, successful logistics giants, large supply chain startups, and brilliant managers who lead MNCs world over. But what is being reported now is that India is having trouble collecting basic data. We can't count the number of people infected. We can't even count the number of people dead. We can't manage basic logistics. We have oxygen in some place, but we can't get it to another place. We can't even manage the relief efforts. The aid that is coming to us, we can't distribute it. Now that is making people question that, well, we know you've been touting your expertise in so many of these fields. You have these leaders emerging everywhere. How come none of these things seem to be working? So what is wrong? And normally you would assume that there is clearly a leadership missing, which is not able to utilize all this expertise that exists within India's public and private sectors and put it to use. And that brings us back to the original topic that if you can't be a leader at home, can you be a global leader? So going on with that, we'll go to Mr. Debashish Roy Chaudhary. So let's bring in your views.
Hi, thank you, Indranil, for that lovely presentation, and thank you all the panelists here. I will argue that the COVID crisis has not caused an irreversible damage to India's global aspirations. On the contrary, if we take the right lessons from this crisis, and if it forces us to take a long, hard look at ourselves and find ways to honestly address our deficiencies, then it will only enhance our global status in the long run. Now,
once again, if I may interrupt, apologies for that. But as an international reporter, if you could also shed some light on what kind of coverage is taking place about India and what is your view of the international coverage of the current crisis. If you could just also weave that into your...
I don't think I need to shed any light on what kind of international coverage is going on about India, because what I can read in the New York Times, so can you. You're very well aware of how the world sees India now and what is the kind of reporting that is going on. So I don't, unless you want me
to... Sorry, what I mean is, but you don't think that is hurting India's image in terms of like how it's being perceived? Is it being perceived as India's failure? Or
let me finish my presentation and then you can ask your questions, all right? Okay. So as I was saying, that I will argue that it has not caused an irreversible damage. It will actually help us in the long run if we learn the right lessons. Now, why do I say that? I say that because what we are witnessing today in India, the desperate hunt for hospital beds, doctors, medicine, oxygen, wood for cremation, a piece of earth for burial, these are all signs of extreme indignity. And no one should live like this. No one should die like this. But is this happening only because of the pandemic? Do most people in India get decent healthcare otherwise? Is this indignity wholly new? So these are the things that we probably need to ask ourselves honestly. We are, of course, embarrassed that the world now knows of the indignity that we are undergoing. But the reality of the Indian life is that a vast majority of our people live in indignity, pandemic or no pandemic. What the COVID crisis has done is that it has exposed this, shall I say, family secret to the rest of the world. But I might have news for you that this was not really a secret for the rest of the world. We have been living in self-denial. We have been building up these big images of ourselves. But as someone who has lived outside India for a very long time, I can tell you that I don't think or the rest of the world was really convinced by whatever we were selling them. So none of this really impacts the global perceptions of India. But if it affects Indian perceptions about India, if it jolts us out of our self-denial, then we may actually one day play that global role that we have always fancied for ourselves. Now, just today, I was reading a story on the print, and the headline was something like, it's 2021, but the floating bodies in UP and Bihar have sent us back to 1918. It alludes to the last influenza epidemic when we had a similar situation of bodies flowing down the rivers. And I think somebody, one of the panelists mentioned 30 or 40 bodies in the Ganga. Dainik Bhaskar, a couple of days ago, it sent 30 of its reporters to do a recce over the 1,300 kilometer stretch along the Ganges. And they reported that they found more than 2,000 bodies actually. So the point is that, so do these floating bodies actually take us back to 1918, as the print says, or here is the tough bit that we need to ask ourselves, or did many of us actually never progress much beyond 1918, which is why we still have this situation? These are the things that we need to ask ourselves honestly. And how is this linked to our global aspirations, you might ask? Because I will say, because people living in indignity are powerless people. And powerless people do not make a powerful state. We can talk all we want about our military, about our naval power, our huge economy, our market, our unique status in the world, our IITs, our IIMs, about our knowledge industry and all that. But I'm sorry, the fact remains that the Indian state is a weak state. And this is what we are witnessing today. What we are witnessing today is happening because Indian state is a weak state. The India Today magazine called it, I think, the failed state in its cover story. Long ago, the economist Land Pritchett famously characterized India as a flailing state. However way you may describe it, failed, failing, flailing, for the Indian state, to say the very least, is a weak state. That's the bottom line. And a weak state will never be a global power. So what we are witnessing today should be an opportunity to do some serious introspection. Or this pandemic crisis is an opportunity to reevaluate our state capacity. If this pandemic forces us to focus on increasing our state capacity, to provide the dignity our people deserve, our global status will rise. It will not fall. So this crisis, if handled honestly, will boost our global aspirations rather than damage it. This is what I would like to submit. And later on, if we have time, I would like to delve specifically into specific areas of state deficiency with hard examples. Thank you.
That was very insightful. Thank you. It's a reality check for India. The global image hasn't really changed outside, but it's sort of bringing back Indians to what their real, how they should be seeing themselves. It's changes for Indians. One thing you mentioned, and I think before you, Dr. Indranil also talked about, is sort of the healthcare infrastructure has been ignored, not just over the last 7 years, but over the last 70 years. And it's always been like that. But the fact that we are in the middle of one of the world's worst epidemics, and we've seen extremely horrible things going on in Europe and in some Asian countries. After that, over the last 10, 12 months, the fact that our priorities didn't change, a lot of the coverage is about those questionable priorities. During this pandemic, we go on, for example, with the election rallies, the Kumbh Mela, but even more than that, the Central Vista project has been a lot of focus on that, spending 20,000 crores on that, which according to Mr. Narayan Murthy could have financed 15 AIMS hospitals and improved the medical facilities across the country. So that is something that a lot of people, international coverage is focusing on. is the questionable priorities of the Indian state. And that's I don't know, so Mr. Suhel said wanted to comment. So maybe you could address that in your next point. And after that, we'll move on to Mr. Sanjay Jha and Mr. Radin Sharda. But we'll start with...
I want to bring you back to the debate. Okay, we've floated all over. In addition to discussing the bodies sadly in the Ganges, I want to come to a couple of points to demolish some of the logic that has been placed in this debate. In my opening remarks, I did make the point that long term, the image can be repaired, like all brands go through cycles of damage. So to counter it, is the damage irreversible? If you look at it from today's vantage point, it seems irreversible, but nothing is irreversible in the world. And I give you examples of how the American image has moved towards the mend. And we've seen that happen all along. I mean, look at Germany. Germany was the hated state when Adolf Hitler was there. Today, you don't hate the state because of all the stuff that happened. Australia, the Aborigines, the whole apology movement. So what is the situation today with India? Number one, there is the feeling that the leadership has let down its people. Whether you like it or not, that's the truth. You know, Mr. Sharda might say, oh, but in the past, ye hua, wo hua. Yes. So blame everything on Jawaharlal Nehru and think you can get away with it? You can't. The reality is...
I haven't used Nehru yet.
No, 1 minute. I know you haven't, but I'm just saying. One after the other, the people have been let down by the leadership, especially in this crisis. Number two, is Narendra Modi working hard? Must be, and he does. Number three, has he been silent? Yes. Silence for a brand which is going through pressure almost suggests either being in self-denial or being complicit. Number three, I'm not bothered about the New York Times or the Washington Post. Newspapers don't build the images of a brand. Please go back to history. A very famous brand called Perrier, the sparkling water. There were traces of benzene found, and there was a case study done on it later as to how it repaired its image. It repaired its image by being true to its core.
Exactly.
They recalled all the products, they recalled all the batches and said, we have recalls in automotives constantly. Toyota had the largest recall in history 6 years ago. Has it dented the image? No. So what do we need to do? I'm a solutions person. You know, we all know what the problems are. Number one, I think Indranil mentioned it. We have not used the private sector's capabilities or our own capabilities to great advantage. Today, if we use technology, we would not have this stupidity that's going around vaccination. Sometimes you open it for 18 to 45, sometimes 45 above. We have no clue. We need to invest and infect technology into the whole vaccination program. Number two, someone needs to come out and tell the people, you don't want to apologize, don't apologize. Tell the people what is the plan going forward. And we need plans across 3 levels: vaccination, medical attention, third wave challenges. Within that, you need to define what you're doing for children who are likely to be affected a lot in the third wave. Indranil would answer that better. Number two, what are you doing in terms of isolation facilities? Number three, what are you doing to rural India? You know, as Indranil mentioned about density of MRIs, you have forgotten that there's rural India. Sanjay referred to it, and rightly so, about the rural hinterland. We've completely obliterated rural India in our minds and in a lot of our discussions. Finally, my solution is don't work on the goddamn image. Don't have political grandstanding between Rahul Gandhi and Narendra Modi and 100 other people. It's irrelevant. People are dying. And, you know, for Shardaji, who I have a lot of time and respect for, he says, no, but, you know, a few bodies. Ask someone who has lost his loved one what he feels about death in his family. Ask someone who's lost his loved one and ask Sanjay Jha.
5 seconds, Mr.
No, 1 minute, 1 minute.
Just 5 seconds.
I'm not interrupting. No, there's no interruption.
Just 5 seconds. Just 5 seconds.
Let me finish. Then you interrupt me. Because my train of thought, I'm not a prepared speaker. Then, as Sanjay Jha rightly mentioned, death in dignity is the least people expect. Devashish referred to dignity as the cornerstone of any society or any state. My point is, do not even attempt to justify or defend. Do not. If I were advising this government, I would say that stop this war. Just stop the war. between, oh, this person said that, this person said that. I think in one way, if Mr. Modi is silent, he's either putting together a plan of action or I don't know. But my last point is use this to learn that battles are not won through which newspaper gives you which headline. It is won through the happiness, the dignity, the livelihoods, and the affordability you provide to every citizen of this country. I'm a genuine believer, even though you put me as a proposer of this proposition, I genuinely believe that India it's inscrutable. This is a huge blip, but we shall recover. We will not recover on our own. We have to introspect, we have to implement, and we have to accept where we failed. Because, my friend, if you don't know where you failed, you won't know where to succeed. Thank you. Yes, Charlotte.
I would like to be optimistic to think that Prime Minister Modi, while he's silent, is coming up with a plan. But after 10 months or 12 months into the pandemic, we realized there was no plan. And there is also the question of priorities. So moving on to Mr.
Can I just jump in?
I just needed to respond to
Mr.
one of the allegations of Mr. Suhel. Just 5 seconds.
Yes,
because I respect his debating quality. I like his brand, mastery and all that. But point is, I never said a few deaths. I said I don't count. I did not say I will never number bad deaths because each human life is important. So to say that I don't care about deaths, sorry. If my grammar is better, I'm sorry.
I stand correct. My apologies.
Yes, thank you very much. Secondly,
my apologies.
Thank you. So, see, we talk of indignity of human life. But Narendra Modi, 5 years back, from the Red Fort said, we want to build toilets for everybody in this country. Crores of toilets are built. During public debates, during TV debates, Mr. Jha may not be there, but his friends, though who come as, substitute for Congress, they actually ridicule the whole idea. They said, what is Modi doing? Building toilets? So is this the kind of thinking we have where we don't respect the indignity or the dignity of the poor people? That is very serious matter, because that is what actually saved us in a big way in the health sector when we made those toilets. And to ridicule that shows our level of debating. Secondly, Mr. Indranil, I don't know what kind of, what his thinking is, but to say that FCR is what is stopping the social service, I'm sorry. All the cases against FCRA NGOs are either for not following accounting practices or legal positions, or where they have been shown to be actually, getting into conversions in the name of getting money from the Western sources. So please let us not defend people or flouted laws. Those who are doing work are getting the rate. So to bring that kind of politics in this debate, I think is very sorry state. And lastly, I agree that government has to come out. It has to say where they have failed, where they're succeeding, how they are doing, what they are doing. Because we have to hear that from newspaper channels. We have to hear from the TV. We have to hear from somebody on the debate that so many things have been done. So oxygen trains have been, 500 oxygen trains and all that. Military being used, planes being used. But why can't government do a daily briefing? If that can't be done, there is a serious issue, because then people don't know where things are going. That is a basic problem. People are scared. They are scared because they don't know where we are going. You declare Tika Utsav and there are no Tikas. Who employed this brilliant idea? When you don't have Tika, keep quiet and tell, okay, we'll not go for the next bracket just because there's public pressure. The time was when the vaccination centers are lying vacant. When my brother went, he was called in like a hawker. Don't go to that particular your table. I have got a space. I have got injections. Please come inside. If that is the status of a vaccination today, to try that everybody wants vaccination, so government suddenly declares 18-year or not, everybody will get vaccination, though there are no vaccines, whatever the reasons. To bow to the public pressure rather than coming very clear why we are doing what we are doing is I think the key sentiment that is hurting today. That is required. As Suhel rightly said, we are not much interested in what Washington Post writes or New York Times writes, because that feed is given by our own Indian journalists. People in the West don't know what's happening. There are certain class of journalists who float those stories. Those stories are reflected in those papers. That's fine. That's the image they have tried to create for our country. But we will overcome that also, because all the false story of Modi not getting visa where he had never applied, they finally died. So this particular issue is that to use the word we don't care, I think that's not right. Government cares. Every state government also cares. There has been a buck passing, which must stop. every state government, every central government should take the call. If there was no meeting for task force for 2 months, some head should have rolled. Secondly, in another debate where Suhel was there, I had suggested that government should call every kind of expert. See, Mr. Devi Shetty certain gave an example. Dr. Devi Shetty gave certain ideas, government immediately followed up. They should have special committees for every possible section, get the best people there, take their suggestion. They don't need money. They don't need any designation. They can guide these people who are babus and never moved out of their offices and who work more to put red ink on their files rather than move the files. That needs to be corrected. For that, any number of people in the government are welcome. Maybe after 6 months, they can go back to their normal job. I'm very sure people will willingly help. And Mr. Devi Shetty has said that the best, so Dr. Shetty has said it is the best possible whatever government did. But I think the way his suggestions are, every suggestion, whether it's Suhel said or whether Professor Indranil, it should be immediately responded to. And they should be called in the governance to help government with various functions that is stuck in. It's a multifaceted job. It's not a small job. Even to coordinate between central government, state government, who are looking the other way, you need people. There could be even Sanjay Jha there. It doesn't matter who is there, but any expert persons invited in the government should be brought in to fight this on war footing.
I just want to say one thing, because Sanjay referred to it and he was very kind when he alluded to that. Piyush Pandey, who Sanjay Jha knows very well of and knows him, he's unarguably one of India's finest creative minds. Piyush Pandey and I were asked on February the 5th, please note the date, February the 5th, 2020, and I've mentioned this in a debate before with Ratanji as well, to work on a anti-vaccine hesitancy campaign. I did the strategy paper, Piyush did the creatives, we submitted them to the people we were supposed to submit them. Not a word, not a tune. Number 2, May the 5th, I was on a Zoom call with an outstanding officer. He seemed outstanding on Zoom, Ajay Khare. He's the secretary of the Information Broadcasting Ministry. Okay, where they asked me for advice. And as Ratanji said, obviously it's pro bono. I said 4 things. Number 1, I said a daily dashboard of recoveries, fatalities, cases. It gives people sahanbhuti, confidence. Number 2, I said there are a lot of questions being asked about foreign aid. There must be a dashboard saying these many oxygen concentrators, this many medicines, this much thing given to this state on such and such date, allocated to this state, this hospital. It's damn easy. Number 3, I said have a weekly press conference addressed by the Home Minister and the Health Minister, because no one is taking the Health Minister seriously. Number 4, I said then have an entire planning process for the 3rd wave. What are we going to do with isolation? All the stuff that I mentioned. May the 5th. We are today on May the 15th. The arrogance of these people, not one person has even called back. This is what I'm saying. So here we are as professionals willing to give of our time, but there are no takers because they think they know it all.
Which brings us back to the points that Mr. Sharda just made, that like he believes the government cares. But so far nobody has answered, like just now you said, they don't take advice from experts. They're not utilizing the experts in the country. But also, what about the priorities? How come the Central Vista project is classified as an essential project, whereas no hospitals have been built? It's not that let's say right now we are lucky that this new virus strain, which is so vicious, is still not resistant to vaccines. It could have been resistant to vaccines. So it's not just about the vaccine hesitancy. We could have been vaccinated and still be hit by it. The tragedy is that people are dying because they don't have access to something so basic as a hospital bed or oxygen. That is what's making the world's heart go out when they see somebody desperately outside a hospital saying that my beloved person couldn't even get access to oxygen, which is something really basic. Why this was not created and why we still don't have this mechanisms to make sure that it's available everywhere. I think that's the real tragedy. And what's making people wonder is like, is that even a priority for this government, even after being through the world's worst pandemic for so long? But Mr. Sanjay Jha wanted to make a point, so I'll come back to him.
I just want to add to what Suhel added about vaccine hesitancy. You see, right now, because demand exceeds supply, everyone thinks there is no vaccine hesitancy. And I think these are the critical errors of judgment that the governments make. I can tell you, if you look at the data of the number of people above the age of 60 who have had the window open since March 1, it's not a significant number which has actually got itself vaccinated. And they are the vulnerable age population. Therefore, you keep coming back to the fundamental point that you see in calm waters, every ship has a great captain. But the real test of political leadership is when there is a crisis management of, well, I mean, this is like an extraordinary magnitude. But you are tested during these times. This is what people vote you in for. This is why you campaign, right? Why does a Rahul Gandhi or a Narendra Modi campaign? They say, listen, if tomorrow there's a natural calamity, there's a war, I'll take care of you. And that's the question we need to ask. Are you doing that given the resources you have? And we understand, we acknowledge that there are limited resources. But are we doing the best with whatever we have? I also have lived in India most of my life. I've traveled abroad at work, but I've never taken up a job abroad because I was always a believer that India gives you the best opportunity because it is an essentially inefficient country. And I can tell you this for a fact, that I think what really worries you about our country is the fact that do we need to go through a tragedy of this magnitude to really begin to discover what we need to do? I agree with a lot of points Deficiencies made, but lessons to be learned. Can we treat human life as such a heavy collateral damage? Do 2 lakh people have to die? Do millions have to suffer? And right now we are not even talking about mental health. I'm telling you, last year people suffered. If there is going to be 2 years of a continuous pandemic stress, there are going to be more and more susceptible people to mental health. We are not even discussing that. We are not even talking about the disruption to the informal sector, to the people in cities who are losing jobs, whose liabilities and EMIs are rising, and whose probably several relationships today are therefore virtually on the brink. There are so many hidden costs involved. And let me add this point here. This is critical, that ultimately I believe we need to raise our bar for public standards. I think we have such low expectations of our politicians that we are very happily compromised with even the basic minimum deliveries we get. I'll give you one example. Is it not the responsibility of any political ecosystem or any government or whichever party that you don't even disclose the actual number of people dying? I mean, that is, in my opinion, the ultimate mortification that you can do to a person who's died, that you don't even recognize the person as what this person has died of. So when I hear about this underreporting of death, that I think bleeds India's soul, that you are actually mocking even the magnitude of the scale of the crisis that we are facing and for which people are dying. I don't want to get into the triumphalism of this government that I think Suhel has already listed out. And I think Ratanji, probably you need to revisit that. You made a lot of statements there, sir, but I need to tell you that ultimately this crisis has to be driven by a central political leadership. The COVID is something that has to be handled at the central level. You got to set the pace and then expect the Naveen Patnaiks and the Uddhav Thackeray's and the Yogi Adityanath of the world will follow you. But you got to set the pace, you got to set a standard. And therefore, I'm going to say one thing as the last point, that, it is important that in a society, in a democracy, and I love that no matter how much people hate America, that's one thing that I love about that country. They fight for each and every life. There's a soldier who gets hurt in Somalia, they will attack the country. But they will do that because that's a great American spirit. Where are we here? I mean, we are allowing people to die, we don't report them, and then we callously dismiss them and say, yeah, if there is no vaccine, should I hang myself? You can't make these statements in these times. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, last point. And Sardaji, that is something that you'll have to address within your, within your political setup. When I heard one of your young firebrand politicians in Bengaluru the other day, give this entire episode a very weird complexion of communalism, then I told myself, do I lose faith in this great country? At a time when we should be one, and we all say, let's fight it collectively, do we need fractures on the basis of caste and religion? Please, I humbly beg, don't do that.
See, since Sanjay ji called me out just for 5 seconds, I do not belong to BJP. I have criticized BJP time and again. So I have praised when it required. When criticized, I criticize it. I have no influence over BJP. About Bangalore incident, we know that it was denied later and everybody agreed that what he said was not what he said. But anyway, it's none of my business, as I said. Where I need to be objective, I'm very objective and I don't fall by any party line. Secondly, he asked about Central Vista. If he says that is the budget issue, that is the money issue, that means all the highway projects should be scrapped, road building should be scrapped, railway development should back, because that is where you get jobs. That is where government gets jobs. It is a known economic theory. So whether Central Vista is stopped for a year or so doesn't damage in any way the economic activities, and those activities are required. And this is not a project that has been brought up now. It has been online for such a long time. So that logic doesn't hold because we try to create a symbolism around it. That is the point.
Thank you for the clarification. Dr. Indranil wants to make a point, and after that, we'll move on to Devishish. Please go ahead, Dr. Indranil.
So one point that has been less discussed here, and one of the manifestation of this crisis and one of the ways people are suffering is the kind of cost that healthcare is bringing today. You know, our health system is one of the most privatized health system, but more importantly, it is entirely driven by the motive of profit. The private healthcare delivery system across the world in countries like Germany or Canada or Japan has very strong private system, but it is not driven by the motive of profit. We haven't done anything to control to some extent the supernormal profit that healthcare delivery system puts on people. We needed to have some regulation on the prices of the private sector. What we have deliberately done in last 2 decades is promote aggressively private healthcare delivery.
Yes.
And when the last year, when the pandemic was starting, one of the major pronouncements that Niti Aayog made that we don't need a lot of care. We'll include PMJY in the PMJY package, will include COVID, and our private sector will take care of the patients. Frankly, that didn't happen. We all saw PMJY utilization reduced significantly. My point is, so far, the ruling class, the upper middle class of the society were happy that they have very good quality private healthcare. We were not caring about the millions of people who were denied care systematically. Now there is a time that COVID is an equalizing force. Even if you are the most powerful person or a simple middle class person, you are fighting among each other for that oxygen. So we need to really systematically rethink about how we want to reshape our healthcare to one which is more focused on care, which is not driven by the logic of profit. It doesn't, apart from US, in the most part of the world, private delivery happens for a not profit motive. Even in US, there is a large part of the private sector which is not for profit. We need to actually think of mechanisms where we can do away with enormous unregulated profit. The kind of cost that people have been charged, inhuman. And that tragedy, that is one of the reasons why we have such a crisis. We need to create an integrated healthcare system where profits are curbed, care is much rationed between people, and a systematic way. We are running here and there. We don't know where to go. And it needs to start with a strong primary healthcare system.
Yes.
A healthcare system that comes to people, seek what is happening. The states which have done better, they have a better public health outreach system. They're going home to see if there is anyone having fever or not, isolating fever cases, going tests. We need to build that system across the country very systematically, more so in the rural area. I'll stop here.
Totally agree.
Sounds very ambitious in the context situation where we are right now. But yes, definitely that's important. Moving on to Devishish. So please.
It's not ambitious at all. Actually, I would like to add to that. And also to what Suhel was saying, basically, I think Suhel's message is that, like, forget the brand promotion, just work on the product, right, Suhel? If you work on the product, if you improve the product, the brand will take care of itself. And this is the time when we need to turn to the product rather than the brand. And to add to what Indranil was saying, I think some of us do not always remember the numbers that we are dealing with here, but the numbers are really, really stark. For example, Indians are among the people who pay the highest out-of-pocket expenses in healthcare. What it does, it pushes millions of people into poverty every year. So in 2011,
5 crore people.
In 2011, 39 million people were, Lancet estimated, were pushed into poverty. I think by 2017, it rose to 55 million every year. That is what we are dealing with here. And look at our health system. The World Health Organization prescribes one government doctor for every 1,000 people. We have one government doctor for every 11,000 people. And in states like Bihar and Uttar Pradesh, it is even worse. As Sanjay will know, in Bihar, you have one government doctor for 28,000 people. So what we are witnessing today, I mean, none of this should be a surprise. But let this be, and Sanjay also said that will it take 2 lakh people to die for us to learn our lessons? The sad thing, Sanjay, is that even then we might not learn our lessons, because when this second wave wanes in a month, maybe after 4 months, you will have completely forgotten about all this. And we will be back to fighting about other stuff, Yogi versus this, lynching, and then we will have new things to outrage about. And by the time the next election comes around, you will see that none of the political parties are talking about public healthcare anymore. That is the sad thing about India.
One important thing that I brought up in my opening remarks, but we didn't really discuss that much, is externally, when we've talked about like India's image, right? And India has been touting itself as the pharmacy of the world, notwithstanding the fact that we have like the lacking infrastructure, health infrastructure you mentioned. So, Mr. Sharda, you mentioned that India's vaccine Maitri helped, the free vaccines that we gave to other countries, and now they are sort of reciprocating with help. But besides the free vaccines, there was also commitments. There were commitments to other countries in terms of what we would deliver. We partnered with UK and other countries where we made commitments to deliver their vaccine supplies, and they were relying on us. And now the reality is we have not delivered. In fact, German Chancellor Angela Merkel even went ahead and said that if India can't deliver, we will have to look elsewhere. So there is definitely a dent in terms of credibility, it seems, that yes, there is a national calamity and everything, but clearly there wasn't enough planning going into having enough resources, having the apparatus to make sure that we have a country of 1.4 billion and we have to supply vaccines to so many other countries too. And now those countries, if you look at Bangladesh, they had paid for 60 million vaccines. They gave first dose to the people because we delivered 7 million or something. And now they are stranded because the second dose can't be delivered. So there is a question of credibility. Would they next time rely on India, even if India is willing to help, or would they go somewhere else?
See, the total amount of vaccines that have been exported from India amounts to just about 3.6% of the total vaccines to be produced by India. India has too much commitment. We know that USA refused to use the raw material. That is when the production of serum institutes dropped, and now it's coming back. So this world knows they are cooperating with each other, know what kind of problems are being faced. USA released medicines, released the raw material for vaccines after some time because of the huge backlash it got from the world. So such issues have arisen where every country wants to be on its own. That's why I said when India did not just think of its own and went all around the world to support people, apart from whatever private contracts were there, it was a positive sign. And if USA tried to renege from its own commitment, it has learned that people don't like it. And India will have to find ways of covering that gap. I think by the next 2 months, as the production rises, as per the projections given by the government, I think that problem can be resolved. And I definitely agree on one point that public health system should not be privatized the way it has been for last some decades. That is also true of education. I firmly believe that primary education, primary health and even the general hospitals should be in the public sector, and those who want to come must come with service issue, not the making money issue. And the way they flee is horrendous, and governments cannot shirk away their responsibilities, whether in education or in medical health. You won't find Abdul Kalam and such people anymore. That
yes,
is the
I
thing,
think
that
yeah.
the people like you and have risen in the ranks from poorest of the poor to take advantage of credit system of the government to get into education, to get into technology, or get into medicine is required. You cannot just simply kill the dreams of other people. Today, doctor spends 4 crores to take an MBBS and then again does a specialization before he starts making money. How do you expect an equitable of the health system? So this has to be directly attacked at the ground level itself as a long-term measure, and that's for sure. I agree with everybody on that.
Can I add a small point on vaccination very quickly, 20, 30 seconds? So we, as India with South Africa, we are asking the world for TRIPS waiver in the WTO. And it has got a lot of accolades from other countries, and countries have joined. What we have been also in the country demanding that why don't you use some of the TRIPS flexibilities like compulsory licensing and give this licensing to lots of vaccine manufacturing companies within the country who can produce it in a larger scale. This had been there in the last 3 months. If we had given this permission, compulsory licensing to other manufacturers, the public sector units which are virtually shut, we could have by now had a much better situation in terms of vaccines.
No, sir, Bharat Covaxin already been given to 3 companies.
Similar thing could have been done to Covishield and others. Yeah.
Covishield problem is it is not owned by us. It is owned by.
You can always exercise. You can always exercise compulsory licensing.
Yes, we can always do that.
Always exercise that. There is no issue.
Thank you. We're actually running out of time. But before we wrap up, I just wanted to get like your summary view. So the way I would basically, as a final question, I would like to ask all of you, after we get through this crisis, and hopefully we can do that as soon as possible, what do you think is going to be the view of the world? Would they see India as an emerging power, emerging leader, suffering under a temporary that's just suffered under a temporary natural calamity? Or would it just go back and reinforce the old notion of India as the incompetent third world? And we'll start with you, Mr. Sanjay Shah.
No, my belief is that if we can go out and tell the world that yes, we are a second most populous country, we might overtake China in a decade and a half, but in India, every life matters. I think the day that becomes the maxim of our entire political vocabulary, India will have arrived. I think until and unless we are able to make a commitment, no matter what scarcity of resources we have, but we will fight tooth and nail for each and every person in India, man, woman, child, in the backwaters of Kerala, down to the hills of the Northeast, down to the famine-starved areas of Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. It doesn't matter where, but the state must never abdicate its primary responsibility, which is the right to life in our constitution. I think when we begin to trivialize that, is I think where somewhere the entire system begins to creak, because then you're willing to make compromises. Because it doesn't matter if there is going to be some degree of loss here, we will cope, we will manage, we will learn. But I do believe that as a country, you will evolve, as I think Suhel and I think everybody rightly mentioned clearly, that countries go through these catastrophic situations. Mostly they emerge stronger, like Germany and Japan after the post-Second World War are extraordinary examples of countries that not only became economic behemoths, but had a very liberal culture. So I do feel that somewhere down the line, India will bounce back. But I want all governments, no matter which political party you come from, to be committed to the life of each and every citizen of India. We have to die for every citizen of India. If the government is to create a helpline for everyone, they should find a way to do it.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for those concluding remarks. Also, the poll we had run, based on your earlier point about the Indian state has failed its people, it seems like the majority of the respondents are in favor of that. We have 67% people who agree with you on that. Moving on, I'd like to get Mr. Suhel for his concluding remarks. So you're on mute.
I'm saying I have none. We've been through this. And, I don't know what your association with branding and marketing is that you think, in the next 2-3 months, things will improve. This is not a bicycle you're riding. It'll take time, but I'm not worried. Okay. And I would also request you not to worry that much. Things in the world take time, my young friend. Okay. This is not some goddamn motorcycle that you're riding. Oh, now I'll move right and now I'll move left. We're talking about civilizational history. We're talking about, as a lot of the panelists said, deep impact of families. My advice would be worry about getting the goddamn product right. Don't wait for the next sweet headline from Time Magazine or New York Times or Washington Post, because it will not help you save a dying person. It will not help your economy. So don't worry about those things and end the debate as soon as you can.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Well taken. Although I would like to make a point. The examples you gave earlier of Germany coming out stronger, those things took a long, long time.
So will we. So will we.
So when India was 10 years of trying to improve the image, and having lived in the US for 10 years, I've seen how India's image has gone up. It does matter to people of my generation that we revert back to where we were probably in 98. This is the way we were seeing that.
So you're in the US, you be a brand ambassador. Why don't you? You guys remember India when you need to recite the Gayatri Mantra to please your grandmother, or when you want to have samosa and chaat. Give back, come back to India. If you're so worried about the Indian state, to hell with your job in the US, come to India. And as people say, work. See, it's very easy to be platitudinal. Oh, I'm in the US, India's getting a bad image. What have you guys done here for India's image? What? You're having 4 CEOs running MNCs, you think you have bolstered India's image? Bullshit. So let's cut out the platitudinal stuff. The reality is our image has taken a knocking. It's not, the story isn't over. We have things to do. We will course correct. We will learn from our follies. Adversity at sometimes throws up the best opportunities. That's what we've got to hope for. As John Maynard Keynes said, in the long run, we're all dead. So, I'm not a great believer, tomorrow everything will be fine. I don't care. But will we be adept, committed to implement some of the things that have gone wrong? That's the question we need to ask.
No, thank you. And just for clarification, I'm based in Delhi. I was talking about the past.
Good. Very good. So you've come back.
I'm facilitating conversations where I want people to have information and honest views and authentic conversations from experts like yourself. Moving on to Mr. Ratan Sharda. Let's get your views, sir.
I just make another point which doesn't come into these debates. It is that the day we end our petty politics, even on national issues, we'll have arrived. Secondly, what does it speak of our own people? We the people. We the people who black market oxygen cylinders. We who black market medicines, who throw medicines away, who create artificial shortages to make money. If this is the character of our people, as a person belonging to Sangha school of thought, I believe this has to change. Till we change ourselves, no government can work. If we think of free bijli, pani and don't think of what is future for us, we are in trouble. So first of all, we as a people, we the people must change. We must not just ride over this issue, then come back to our own, petty behavior in life where my own profit matters, my own comfort matters. So till we come over that and think something about the society and the nation, whether it's politics or non-politician citizens, we will have these problems time and again. We have to rise above that if we really want to become a long-term player and long-term what we aspire to be the Vishwa Guru of the world. That can only happen if we improve ourselves.
Thank you, sir. Devashish, you want to go next?
Yes, that's exactly what I would like to reinforce as well. So forget the brand, just as Suhel said, work on the product. Because frankly, apart from Indians, no one really thinks Indians have arrived. Only Indians think that Indians have arrived. Everybody else realizes that India is a work in progress. And we have somehow convinced ourselves that we are this world power and we are going to dominate the world and blah, blah, blah. So let's go back to the basics. Try and improve our state capacity. Try and focus on public healthcare, education, quality of work. There is a lot of work to be done. Let this be a wake-up call. And then we can improve ourselves.
Inshallah. Hopefully that happens.
Thank you.
Dr. Indraneil?
So thanks for giving me the chance to say the last few words. I would say that one of the ways to change things is to bring back our constitutional values, deepen our democracy to the core, and we have lost a lot of grounds on these things. When Suhel said that how US very quickly could gain back, because it went back to its constitutional values of caring the world. One of the ways it did is to care for the developing world. And the WHO budget was cut, it gave back some of the money. So we need to first take care of our people, deepen the democracy, which says that it is a country where everyone is equal. Let us try to establish that. All the images will be corrected in that manner.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you to all the panelists for your...
And Yajur, one last thing, my friend.
Yes.
We don't live in a country. We are part of a civilizational history. Remember that. All civilizational histories have had pulls and pressures. The beauty about our country is we are almost like, what should you say? Like someone who doesn't believe that things will befall us, and they do. We have shown time and again the resilience that we have. So I don't need to be pessimistic. I don't need to be optimistic. That's the problem with Indians. We stand between two stools. We now need to embrace realism. We need to be realists. We have a problem. We need to address that. By being in denial, the problem won't go away. India's like the bumblebee. Aerodynamically, the bumblebee can't fly because of its size. But the bumblebee doesn't know that. So it flies happily. I'm saying let's not be that bumblebee where we are flying happily without course correct. And I think it's a great effort by argumentative Indians to actually look at a solution from an argument rather than to enhance the argument without a solution.
Yep, our goal is not to settle any matter, but we want to bring out the perspectives and insights from experts like yourself. And the ultimate goal is that...
Last one sentence, taking on from what Suhel said. For last whole year, earlier 2 years, I've been telling, our NRI and PIOs who keep lecturing on India, who keep, thinking nothing but Modi and India, Bharat Mata. I tell them, stop worrying about India. We are there. Think how you can improve India's image and lobby for India's image in the global stage, because narrative starts from USA, narrative starts from Western world about good or bad of India. That is your role as influencers begins. I think if you do that, you'll be doing a great service.
It does not really help, sir, because if India improves, it won't need to look for lobbyists.
No, sir.
It will tell its own story. It will tell its own story.
No, see, point is, one is COVID, other is on every other civilization issue. When India is misread, then it needs to be corrected.
But sir, that's a separate debate. Let me tell you.
Yeah, I just
comparing ourselves to China and all. We have 3 Nehru centers across the world. China has used soft power in a much more diligent way than we have.
Definitely. Yes.
We intend to actually host a debate one day on this topic, whether India should just ignore or whether it should stand and refute and counter all that global.
See,
you cannot ignore the world.
The elixir of youth. See, the youth of our country take extreme positions. You don't be extremists in thinking, my friend. Where did you study? In Delhi?
IIT Delhi.
Yeah, if you had been in Calcutta, it would have been a different ball game. You have to look at life through the prism of a very liberal, settled outlook. There's no extreme position. You're young. One day you will run this country, hopefully not into the ground. And on that note, we must all take leave.
Thank you all of you for your encouragement and support.
Take care. Bye.
Thanks, Sanjay.
Thank you.
Bye, Indraneil. Bye,
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, Yaj.